Lost in a sea of trust, I never saw the iceberg of betrayal coming. My life, once a harmonious symphony with Jenna, became a cacophony of lies. "How could you?" I asked, my voice a mixture of disbelief and sorrow, as Jenna's silence spoke volumes. Secrets and lies wove a dark tapestry, unraveling the love we once knew. This is my tale of betrayal and search for truth. Enjoy watching it. It took a split-up and a 3-year-old kid to make me see what I'd been avoiding. I didn't want to face it. I'd looked away as long as I could. But then it was right there. We were saying goodbye to my grandpa, who passed because his heart gave out, and the 3-year-old was my girl, Alissa. We were at my mom's place the day after saying goodbye, getting ready to head back. The bags were all packed and in the car. I was getting Alissa in her seat. "Want your shoes off, sweetie?" I asked her. I knew what she'd say, but I loved hearing her answer. "Yes, please," she said clearly and serious. I smiled and started taking off her tiny shoes. I didn't need to ask about the socks. She always wanted them off. It had to be from my side. Barefoot is better for me, too, than hot, tight shoes. With her socks off, she wiggled her toes, happy. I tickled her feet. She was ready for it, watching me, ready to giggle and kick, pretending to get away from my tickles. But she wouldn't be happy if I didn't do it. It was our fun game, something we both loved. I realized we were doing this more these days. My little girl and I loved our time together. Not the same with my wife, Laura, though. Before I could think more, my sweet girl pulled me back. "Daddy?" Alissa asked. I was leaning over her, putting her shoes next to her. I tucked each sock into its shoe and pushed them into the seat so they'd stay put. "What's wrong, sweetie?" I asked softly when she didn't speak right away. I looked into her eyes. "Why doesn't Mommy love us anymore?" she asked simply. I was shocked. I looked at my little one, lost for words. "Honey, your Mommy loves us a lot, really," I said slowly. "And she loves you the most in the whole world." For a short time I saw a light in her eyes, but then it vanished. "But she didn't come with us to say bye to Grandpa," she said with a sad voice. I had no good answer, only what Laura had told me. "She had work, sweetie." I thought about telling her about the big job at the place where my wife worked and how it took all her time, but that would be too much for a 3-year-old to understand. I was silent for a bit. "Mommy will be there when we get back, my love, waiting for you." "Does she have to work at night too?" Alissa asked. I started to say no. Her mom went out at night with friends. Too much to explain. But again, it would make Alissa ask more than I could answer. "No, my girl," I said. "I think Mommy's almost done with working so much. Then she'll have a lot more time for you and me." I suddenly wanted to end this talk. It was too hard. I clicked the last buckle on the car seat, gave my precious daughter a kiss, and patted her arm before shutting the door. 20 minutes later, she was asleep in the back seat as I drove down the highway. My daughter slept, but my mind was awake. I kept thinking about her sad words. If a 3-year-old noticed, it wasn't just me. That's what my wife suggested last time I asked why she was out with her friends so much. The sun was almost down when we got home. My wife Laura was indeed there. Alissa ran upstairs, full of joy and lots to tell her mom about all the cousins she saw at my folks'. I followed, my mind stuck on gloomy thoughts from our ride home. Why was my wife always at work or out with her friends? I found Laura by her mirror doing her makeup in her underwear. She stood to give me a quick kiss and hello. I realized I couldn't recall the last time she kissed me deeply or hugged me tight to show her love. I sat on our bed and watched as Alissa tried to chat with her, but Mom didn't seem to listen, and soon our little girl left for her room, silent. Laura kept on with her makeup, focused on getting it perfect. "What's up, Laura?" I tried to ask without showing my upset. My stomach knotted and I felt hot. Catching my breath was hard. "What do you mean?" she answered, still working on her eyes. She saw I was bothered, but didn't stop with her makeup. "We've been home just 10 minutes, I said, voice rough. "And you're heading out again." She paused on her lash brush, looking annoyed. "Babe, you know I meet the girls on Fridays?" She spoke as if tired. I didn't like how she sounded or what it meant. "Actually," I said with a hint of spite, "you're out with them Saturdays, some Sundays, almost every Wednesday, and nearly every Friday for happy hour." Sometimes they turn into one long, hard night. Alissa went off quiet after her mom had shut her out and was in her room, door shut. I heard the sounds of one of her toys start to play a tune getting up. I shut the bedroom door and turned to see Laura, also up and staring at me, no look on her face, moving quick. I got close to her and grabbed both her hands in mine. I held them tight to my chest. "Laura," I said, slow, trying to keep my voice calm. I didn't want it to break now. Today, Alissa asked me why you didn't love us anymore. And Laura, I have to ask too. It looked like Laura's eyes got a bit narrow then. It showed I stepped into a no-go zone. I didn't stop and kept going. Do you still love me?" I asked my wife of 6 years. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she let go of a clear upset and leaned into me. "Of course, dear," she said soft. "I love you more now than when we got married, and I felt so happy I thought I'd burst. My stomach was still in knots, but I tried to calm down. She was happy, but not now." "Then stay home tonight, dear," I said, pushing away my doubts. I didn't let my voice sound begging. Laura sighed, touching me and patting my chest. "We can put Alissa to bed early," I said. "Turn down the lights and bring out that wine we've been saving, and you can wear that black lace top I got you for Valentine's Day. How about that?" Oddly, her body had seemed into my idea until I said that. Then she got stiff and tried to step back. I kept hold of her wrists and didn't let her go far. "Laura," I said on purpose, "are you seeing someone else?" I watched her close as I spoke, and there it was. I saw a quick shift deep in her eyes and a tiny tense at the edge of her eyes. Then they were gone. They were gone in a flash, but I saw them. I heard a sharp breath as she took in air fast. What stayed was a fast beat I felt under my fingers. I was holding her wrists, and the tips of my first 2 fingers were on her main bloodlines. It was as good as any lie test. I knew then. "Don't be silly," my wife said. "Honey, I could only love you. You know that." She moved closer, put her head on my shoulder, and breathed softly on my neck, giving me small kisses. But her head didn't press down enough to mess up her hair. Did Laura feel the cold wave going through me? Laura tapped my arms and stepped back, looking at the clock by the bed. "I'm late," she said. "I promised my friends I wouldn't be again. I need to go." "But maybe tomorrow night?" she asked softly. "Laura, we need time together," I said, letting my annoyance show. "Tell your friends another time and stay with me and our kid. How about that, please?" I tried. She moved to her closet, took out a short skirt. "I can't let my friends down," she said. "Why would you do that?" she snapped. "Why would you let me and your kid down?" I shot back. "Don't we matter to you?" My wife's eyes got sharp as she got mad like me. "Tomorrow," she yelled. "Damn it, I need my own time without you always there and making me feel trapped. I'm not your slave." We fought more. She said she was her own person in this marriage. I told her I couldn't boss her around, that she was free to relax and have fun after a rough day at work. I reminded her that I always let her do her thing, like when she went back to work after our baby was born. I was all for it, even though I made enough cash for us. I was proud of her job at the accounting firm, but I didn't get why her nights out were more important than us. I got a bit sharp about her friends, which made her more upset. She asked if I was accusing her of something, then I walked out. I was too angry and didn't want to say something I'd regret. So I cooled off on the living room couch. I was angry, thinking of stopping her from leaving, but I knew I couldn't. When she came down, we stared at each other. She looked ready to fight, and me, I felt bad. "Laura," I said, my voice coming out deep and shaky. She paused, like she might stay. Then she left. "Laura," I called out again, stronger. "I love you. Please don't do this to me and Alissa." Laura looked back at me, her face totally devoid of any expression. Then she stepped through the door and closed it decisively behind her. Alissa came running down the Saint stairs and into the foyer. She opened the outside door and watched as the headlights of her mother's Lexus disappeared down the street. Without saying a word, she shut the door and walked quickly over to the couch. I knew that walk. The marble floor felt so hot she couldn't stand it. She jumped on the couch near me, looking at the door, wishing her mom would come back. I looked too. Then Alissa got on my lap, and we hugged a lot before I took her to the kitchen to make some sandwiches. The weekend was cold and hard between Laura and me. She came back late at night and was so ill from drinking that any small sound hurt her after she was mean. For a bit, Melissa and I left for the park, not coming back till after dinner. Laura didn't like that. She yelled at me when Alissa and I returned, saying I was bad for leaving her. I listened for a bit, then had enough. I told her it was her fault for leaving her kid and going out. I said she must get used to the idea of Alissa and I having fun without her and deal with it. I was clear, telling her to be nice or be quiet. I had never talked to her like that, which shocked Laura. She was quiet and nicer to Alissa that night, softening up later. I tried to get closer, but Laura felt sick and had to stop. I tried again on Sunday, but Laura didn't respond, so I stopped and lay there, angry. After some time, I went to shower, hoping it would calm me down enough to sleep. It only helped a little. Monday morning, I left home before Laura woke up. It was rare for me, mainly because it meant Laura had to wake Alissa, get her ready, feed her, and take her to daycare. My wife didn't like that unless she was all set up. It made her more than 30 minutes late for work. I wasn't feeling like making things easy for Laura that day. Before leaving that morning, I went down to the basement, opened a locker that looked like it was just for random tools, and hit a switch that turned on a tiny machine that would tape every call made from our home phone. A second switch turned on a thing that would catch any cell calls made close, within 150 feet. It wasn't exactly legal, but no one knew about it. I wouldn't use the caught info in court or anything. We already had cameras in almost every room after I watched a show on TV about how they solved a murder with video from inside a house. I put them all over. Another reason was to watch any babysitters. Laura and I got to watch our kid as well as the cleaner who came in thrice a week. We trusted the cleaner and also the teen girls we got to babysit for a bit. On those nights, Laura and I went out. But to trust and check felt right to me. We hadn't needed a babysitter in months. I wondered if the pricey camera system was worth it. I drove inside the big fence with sharp wire on top around the new place and to the office on the other side. The fence and sharp wire went up when we got our first big job from the Department of Defense 3 years back. After that, the DoD came back twice for more deals. Small, but they made us more money. I pulled into a big parking spot and turned off the car. I sat still, trying to decide. I felt like Laura was hiding something, but my head said I had no real proof. My heart raced and I breathed in fast, but that wasn't enough to be sure. I saw guilt in her eyes, but maybe it was for something else, something only a bit related to what I'd asked her. I hoped so. The logo in front of my car was covered, and it snapped me out of my thoughts. I lifted my head and said hi to Phil Sanders, one of my first hires. Opening the door, I said a quick hello and got my Palm Pilot and briefcase from the back seat. Before going in, I looked at the bright logo. That's my business. I'm Mark Archer, 34, CEO and boss of a small company that began as a toolmaker 12 years ago. We found our spot making move and turn mounts for home security cameras, working hard to sell. We found detective firms that needed good spying gear. Over time, we built a strong group of clients who trusted us for high-quality remote control mounts. 8 years back, we bought a small firm that made top-notch color cameras with great zoom. The whole thing, with a strong broadcaster and a separate receiver that could hook up to any TV, was tinier than a lady's lipstick. Now, my small company had it all, and we started selling our stuff all over the state and planned to sell online. Then we took in a couple of detective firms and merged them into one part. We named it Info and Watch Partners. In a year, we had set up shop in 3 more cities. MA Industries was doing great, staying under the radar. In my office, I signed papers my secretary, a kind of task boss, gave me without looking them over. It was a daily thing, and they just needed my sign. I liked to joke with her, calling her Radar now and then. She'd snap back, telling me, Colonel Potter, to watch what I was doing. Maggie was the heart of our office. Without her, things didn't go as smooth, and I feared the day she'd tell me she was leaving. To keep her around as long as possible, I paid her as much as the company vice presidents. She was in on that secret. Maggie, I said when she brought my first coffee of the day. Can you get Carl Winters to see me? She looked confused. Can I say why? She asked. I first shook my head, then thought better of it. I felt I owed her some sort of hint. Maggie was like a mom to me since the start in our old spot. Just say I need to be his client, I told her slowly, not meeting her gaze. She paused. Oh dear, she said softly. I'm so sorry, Mark. She sniffed and hurried out. I wondered what she guessed. Carl ran our spy and detective work. Maggie understood my need to talk to him as a client was serious. What's up, Mark? Carl popped in. I gestured for him to shut the oak door. I sat there not looking at anything while he took his first sip of tea from the big cup Maggie had made for him when he got here. Carl. I tried to start talking but had to stop to clear my throat. It was hard to get rid of the tight feeling there, just like the tense muscles in my stomach. They hurt. Carl, I need to tell you. I'm scared Laura's getting into something bad she'll regret later, I said slowly. I was trying to pick my words carefully, not wanting to say I thought she was seeing another man behind my back. Mark, he said, looking sad. Damn, I'm sorry to hear that, he told me. We both took a deep breath. Carl put his mug down on the corner of my desk and just looked at his nails, not saying anything. I didn't know what to say either. Well, he said after a long, awkward pause. Well, we've got all we need to check things out for sure. I can get some temp workers to cover for our guys so they can focus on this. Can you tell me Laura's work hours, her cell number, computer logins, credit card info, stuff like that? I nodded. I started to say no to using our own people for this job instead of hiring outside help, but then I realized Carl wanted the best folks on it. Sighing, I bent to the side of my desk and pulled my briefcase closer. I'd spent most of Sunday writing down account numbers and other info I knew he'd need from documents Laura and I had. I had Carl set me up as a paying client of Information and Surveillance Associates. I'd pay that part of my company out of my personal bank account. It was a small thing, but it would keep the account checkers happy. We talked about how to quietly watch my wife to see where she went, who she met, and what they did. I felt silly for doing it, and that was dumb. In addition to the fact that I had understood on Friday night that I had been gradually becoming further distant from Laura's adoration. The pain that I had experienced over the past weekend made it imperative that I address this matter. Honestly, if Laura was not doing anything that could be considered detrimental to the marriage, she would never be aware of what I was doing. There were things that I needed to know. Also, I may find a way to recommend that we seek the assistance of a marriage counselor in order to find a solution to whatever problem she was struggling with. What I wanted to know by midday was whether or not she was engaging in behavior that is inappropriate for a married lady. I needed to know this information right now. People belonging to Carl's group had broken into Laura's Lexus, which was parked in the office building in the downtown area where she worked. The task was not tough. I then handed over my key to them because my name was also on the title. Under the driver's seat, they put the sound-powered microphone that they had purchased. Anywhere within a radius of 1 meter might pick up the signal that was transmitted by the little transmitter. On its own, the microphone was sensitive enough to pick up even a whisper that was coming from within the well. An automobile that is soundproof. A global positioning system, GPS transmitter, was situated in a concealed area of the trunk, and it started transmitting the location of the vehicle instantly, exact to within a few feet of the target. The investigation was being handled by 7 of Carl's most talented employees, and he had committed 5 vehicles to the endeavor. In order to guarantee that the rental automobiles and vans would not break down in the event that they were required, our in-house mechanics inspected each and every one of them. The majority of one more female, a freelancer with outstanding credentials, submitted her application for a position at Laura's accounting firm, and she was anticipated to begin working there the following week. The advice that Carl gave me was to relax and let him handle everything on his own. Because there were previously established protocols in place to deal with situations such as this one, it was in my best interest to refrain from getting involved for the time being. That made me feel even more depressed. What if Laura was having an affair with another man? In light of the fact that it was such a banal and unremarkable matter, there were already established protocols to deal with it. Also, he informed me that I had an option. They might make an effort to break up a tryst that is about to take place if they learned about it. If my intention was to do so, or if we were to delay our actions in order to acquire a large number of photographs and videos for a divorce proceeding, I made the decision to halt any assignment that they discovered the assignment for. I didn't have to give it any thought at all. I desired to have my wife back. After nodding, he inquired, requested that I make every effort to avoid disrupting Laura's routine. When we reached a point where we needed to make a decision, he would let me know. Instead, I informed him that a cusp has already arrived and will soon be leaving. I made a phone call to him from the basement that evening. After listening to the recordings that were obtained from the mobile phone intercept, We realized that the material that was taken at that time was not legal. Nonetheless, we did not anticipate using it in court. On the second ring, Carl responded to the call. A Carl? I inquired about it. He was able to pick up on the fact that my voice was thick with emotion very instantly. Holy cow, it was said by him. What has taken place? It was clear that he was concerned about one thing. In an effort to regain control of myself, I took a deep breath and held it for a little period of time. You are aware of the landline and cell phone intercepts that I was required to install when we were building the house, right? I inquired about it. It's true. Despite our best efforts, we were unable to travel to that location today in order to set up the remote monitoring equipment. It is true, Carl. Are you sure that there are only 26 hours in a day? Regardless, Carl, you shouldn't give it any thought at all. Around 7 o'clock, I have a recording of a conversation that took place between Laura and a man named Brian. I extracted a ragged lung full of air and proceeded with my work. My guess is that you will be able to hear it for yourself as of tomorrow. However, Brian referenced the son of a witch when he said that he would soon be screwing Laura's brains out once more. Even though I wanted to cry, I refused to allow tears to gather in my eyes. A ball of eye began to develop in the bottom of my stomach, and I was unable to stop it from happening. I had the sense that my entire body was made of wood, as if I were encircled by tremendous layers of cotton that numbed every sensation. It stung in my chest. I was unable to take a breath. When I found out that Laura was having sexual relations with another man, I was confused. She went outside the marriage for sex, and I couldn't think of any explanation I could have provided her for doing so. I was perplexed as to why she would act in such a manner of betraying both me and our daughter. Even so, I made an effort to swallow the lump that was in my throat. My statement to you, Carl, is that when I have sufficient control, that shifts our attention. In the morning of tomorrow, I will give Pete a call and initiate the process of divorce proceedings for Laura. At this point, I believe that what we need to do is collect as much evidence as we possibly can. Pete Robinson was a high-powered attorney who was on retainer for AM Industries and also served as my personal attorney. Her name was Peter Robinson. I agree with you, Mark, and I suppose there isn't much else that we can do. In a manner that was slow and hesitant, Carl spoke his remarks. His words were, I am just so sorry. I am so sorry that I am at a loss for words to express how sorry I am. It was his empathy that he told me helped some. My response was, yeah, I know, Carl, and I raised the volume of my voice somewhat. Thank you very much, partner, but the credit goes to Laura. It is not the fault of anyone else. On the other hand, I have a young girl who is going to be utterly heartbroken. We are the victims, both she and I. When it comes to Laura's actions, I am completely perplexed. I concentrated my concentration on the task at hand. It was not my intention to play the role of the long-suffering husband beyond this moment of singleness and melancholy. Okay, so I just wanted to let you know that we are going to be moving in a different path, and that change will take effect immediately. I informed him that I will be in the office tomorrow morning. Is that okay with you? Certainly. It is Mark. He was in agreement. Hey, tonight is the time to relax, all right? Don't do anything that you'll come to regret, boss. Sincerely, he stated it. When he warned me not to do anything that could cause my wife physical damage, I knew he was serious. Yes, Carl, I am fine. I informed him that I had run the tape on this intercept 3 hours ago and that I am already well over that point. I paused for a little moment. I am going to inform you, Carl, that I will not be sleeping with her tonight or any other night in the future. I will have to come up with an excuse, but at the same time, I will not sleep with a woman who stabs me in the back, whether it be literally or symbolically. There are things that I am able to do and others that I am not able to do. No matter how much I know it will complicate the investigation, I just can't do it. The final words I spoke were delivered with a crack in my voice, but Carl did not comment on it. He said in a reassuring tone, "That's okay." Those who are engaging in activities of this nature always have the misconception that they are more intelligent than the rest of us, Mark, even though it may take a little bit longer. Despite the fact that they are under the impression that they are able to conceal their adultery from their partner as well as the rest of the world, they are completely unaware that their behavior is predictable and relatively simple to trace. I did not make any statements. Don't give up, boss. You made it this far. Carl said that everything will turn out well in the end, irrespective of the manner in which it is handled. Can you hear me? You are going to emerge from this experience more powerful than you were when you first entered it. Is that okay? Whichever way you look at it. I said, yeah, I will do that. On the other hand, I did not believe it. When I looked into the future, all I could see was a black pit filled with shame and agony for both my daughter and me. This was going to give her a great deal of emotional distress, and I hadn't even begun to think about it. All right, Mark, please give me a call if there is anything you require my assistance with, all right? Talk to me, even if it's simply a verbal exchange. All right. My cell phone has an off button, and I told him that I would press it immediately, in order to record any further communications that may have taken place between my beloved wife and whoever it was that she was deceiving. I reactivated the intercept device. On that particular night, I slept in a guest bedroom located down the hall, and I informed Laura that I was suffering from a dry throat and some congestion that could perhaps cause me to snore severely. This was a swift and unremarkable agreement from her. Also, I told her that it would be closer to Anne if she might require one of us in the night. On top of that, the fact that our young child had soiled the bed a couple of times the previous week was news to Laura. But she shrugged her shoulders and went back to reading her magazine. Despite the fact that I noticed the emotional difficulties that our daughter was going through, Laura did not seem to be affected by it. A preliminary report was brought to my attention by Carl. It was Brian C.R. who was Laura's sexual companion the following afternoon. At the same workplace where Laura worked, there was one of the former spouses who worked in accounting. In addition to Laura, he was one of the 3 supervisors of the division. He had a daughter who was 7 years old and a son who was 9 years old. He was married up to that point. Pamela, his wife, worked as a part-time insurance agent in an office located in the opposite side of town. I was 38 years old, and Brian was a little taller than I was, but he was quite a little shorter. When I was in my early teens, I participated in the Golden Gloves organization as an amateur boxer. Concurrently, I began training weights in order to enhance the power of my upper body and the endurance of my legs. Despite the fact that I stopped boxing when I went to college, I continued to lift weights on a number of occasions each week. Based on the one photograph that Carl had discovered up to this point, it seemed as though Mr. Collier was more of a runner, if he was even an athlete at all. Although I was unaware of what women thought to be handsome, I had a hunch that he would be attractive to the average woman, but not particularly so in general. Honestly, I wasn't all that impressed. I was not sure. It was because of him that Laura would be tempted to disobey our wedding vows in such a blatant manner and meet to have sexual relations with this jerk. Carl had bribed a contact he had with the phone company in order to obtain a complete 2-year history of Laura's phone records, and some of his employees had rapidly gone through them. Initially, there were only a few phone calls between the two, and they were made on times that were very far apart, according to the findings of the first analysis. The calls had started to become a weekly occurrence a little less than 6 months ago, and soon they became a daily occurrence instead. Currently, they were happening 2 or 3 times a day, most frequently in the wee hours of the morning or late at night. Carl was aware of the time that I arrived at work, and he informed me absolutely that the two were having a conversation. When I left the house in the morning, almost every single time, the calls that took place in the evening were virtually always initiated by Laura, and they were unquestionably made at times when Laura could be certain. It is quite unlikely that I would have been able to overhear, but it was probably when I was working out in the basement with my kid keeping me company. When it came to my typical workout periods, the timing was just about perfect. Have you any information that you might share with me regarding what took place around the time when the number of phone calls started to increase? Carl inquired about it. In regard to everything, he was acting in a very businesslike manner, and I admired that. From my perspective, it made the process of dealing with it a little bit simpler. When Carl noticed that I was beginning to relax a little bit, he joined me in doing the same thing on the other side of the desk. I sat back in my chair to ponder, and I even rested my feet up on the near center corner of my desk. It dawned on me all of a sudden, or perhaps not at all. A couple of weeks prior to that, she attended a training conference in Chicago with a corporation that had engaged her firm to audit their financial records. The seminar was provided by the company, I stated with apprehension. I was able to recall more of it as I continued to think about it. As I mentioned earlier, during the time that I was pausing, a piece of a memory began to form into something that I could visualize in my head. During that time, I accompanied Laura to the airport. It was a sluggish voice. This other individual was also present, and he was boarding the same plane. I am able to recall it as clearly as a trumpet. All right, said Carl with self-assurance. Despite the fact that I will have my family continue their search for another nexus, I believe that we will discover that the seminar was the initial event that led to this entire disaster. Quite a few indicators are pointing in that direction. I gave a slight nod. Even though I am a guy, I do not believe in the concept of coincidences. It was Carl who checked his notepad. It's all for the time being, boss. As he stated, a digital copy of all the action that occurred over the course of the previous year was emailed to us by the credit card issuers. The fact that you and Laura have jointly created accounts on each of them is beneficial. I am reminded of that. In the later part of today, we will also be looking at your bank records to determine whether or not there is anything there. I will keep you updated on what we discover next. All right. The amount of material that had already been amassed, both in terms of its breadth and depth, left an impression on me. It had only been a little over 2 days since they had begun working on the case. What was your method for obtaining all of that without my permission? I inquired about it. I pondered whether or not it was truly appropriate for me to raise a fuss with the banks and phone providers on the ease with which they released private information. Carl wore a grin. What do you think about all of that? It was said by him. I allowed my eyebrows to raise in a curious manner. It was a chuckle. In the event that Maggie places a pile of documents in front of you, boss, you have no idea what you are signing. A smile was required of me, and I had to keep it from falling off my face. When I was younger, I used to declare that I trusted Maggie even more than I trusted my wife. The top spot was now occupied by Maggie. All right, all right. As I raised my hands in a gesture of submission, I said, "Proceed to engage in combat with the malevolent individuals and females." By Thursday, I had informed him. Carl and his team had amassed a big mountain of information about my wife and her new sex partner. Several detectives had been dispatched to Chicago, and they'd already turned up a half-dozen people at the company organizing the seminars who remembered Laura and Brian as being quite close. Before he learned that they had different surnames, one of the desk clerks, who had been a witness to the most of their shenanigans, had been under the impression that they were married to each other. A further 3 or 4 others who were staying at the hotel where Laura and Brian were staying described them as frequent visitors to the lounge, where they appeared to consume a significant amount of alcoholic beverages. Evidently, they would stumblingly make their way to the elevator and then ascend to either one of the rooms. On 2 separate instances, the management of the lounge had to request that they reduce the risky activity that they were engaging in during the early hours of the morning. 2 investigators working for Carl stated that they were in the process of negotiating with the management of the hotel to determine whether or not the security camera tapes from that time period were still available and whether or not they could be obtained for a cost that was reasonable. That was a euphemism for an underhanded transfer of recordings for greenbacks, Carl explained to me with a grin. He was referring to the transaction. I gave a slight nod. Because of the way he spoke, I was able to comprehend that. His freelance operative had been called in for a brief assignment in Laura's office considerably earlier than intended, and she was immediately reporting that Brian and Laura were an item around the office. This was a significant development. It would appear that their shared employer was aware of the situation as well, and he had cautioned them on multiple occasions to keep their affair confidential within the office. According to the information that was provided, Laura had previously lost a merit rise on her income as a result of a poor performance report that was based on her behavior. I stored the information in my memory. My legal representative would be interested in hearing about a company that did not take significant action to prevent patently obvious violations of the morals clauses that were inserted into the contracts of its employees. While working in the payroll department, the freelancer had already received copies of Laura and Mr. Kohler's pay records, as well as information regarding their time and attendance. At first glance, it seemed as though the dynamic duo was going to schedule a meeting for 1 or 2 afternoons per week. The credit card information that Carl received from our bank revealed that it appeared that Brian S.R. was also a slacker. This was due to the fact that Laura paid for the majority of the rooms at an economy hotel located on the outskirts of town. From my perspective, that was a clear indication of how a cheap and disgusting affair this was. Even a respectable hotel in the downtown area was unable to accommodate their gathering. The small circle of girlfriends that Laura claimed she was going to meet when she went out at night was mostly made up of women who had just divorced or were unmarried and were definitely looking for men. All of them, with the exception of a woman named Kathy, had taken an oath given by Laura to keep the information a secret. We are conveying a great deal of information to Carl's investigators while also speaking quickly. It was all that was required for the majority of them to provide dates, locations, and even an estimated time when Laura and Brian would hook up. All it needed was $100, as if that were a coincidence. However, as of late, even that fictional work had been rejected. In the past 2 months, the majority of the females had not seen Laura. I am Kathy. A call was sent to Laura very immediately, and she was informed that she had been questioned by an unknown individual regarding her involvement with the groups. Laura was adamant that she had not disclosed even the slightest amount of information about the situation. It would have been appropriate to bind Kathy. She believed that it was ridiculous, vindictive, and cruel of me to check up on Laura, who was a close friend of hers. The assumption that she made that it was me was correct. In terms of logic, I was the person to suspect. Kathy, of course, had a great deal of experience in things of this nature, but her knowledge is still lacking. Inquiry into the history of Kathy revealed that she had been divorced twice before due to the fact that she had witnessed her husband cheating with his secretary. In addition, the second time was due to the fact that her new husband discovered her with the plumber. Kathy had been a man who had wandered from man to man over the course of his life. She was identified as a correspondent in divorce lawsuits on 2 separate instances, 2 of which were situations in which she went out of her way to seduce the husbands. In spite of the fact that she did not even work in the same building as the other people, this woman had managed to inadvertently become a member of the same group as my wife. At the very least, it appeared like Kathy was supporting the affair to some degree just because she had the ability to do so. In addition, we were aware that Carl had cloned Laura's mobile phone, which was the reason why the bribes of $100 were still being held with the other women. Kathy had offered Laura the promise that they would genuinely give her up, and the other girls reacted to Laura's terrified calls with assurances that they would do the same thing. The idea never occurred to Laura. In reality, the only thing that Laura was aware of was that someone was inquiring about her, but her friends were all working together to keep her secret a secret. I was once again astounded by the amount of information that Carl's operation had created in such a short period of time, both in terms of its number and its quality, she thought. It goes without saying that Brian and Laura were the most amateurish of the bunch, while Carl was the epitome of a professional. There was no prospect for Brian and Laura to succeed. The other days of that week, as well as the following 2, were rather peaceful in our house. The ladies went out to a couple of clubs and danced for a time with pretty much anyone who asked, according to Carl's representatives, who confirmed that Laura had canceled virtually all of her plans for a night out on the town, with the exception of Friday. After that, everyone went straight back to their homes. When Brian was a young lad, he was a gentleman who stayed at home with his wife and children. I heard a report that claimed Brian's wife wasn't all that delighted to have him home, and she had been rather vocal while questioning about his abrupt change of behavior. I discovered this information after reading the story. I was really aback by the fact that the investigators' questioning of the girls in the small group had such a quick and insignificant impact. On the other hand, I received the impression that Laura and Brian's attitude toward me was characterized by a certain degree of arrogance. On the other hand, they have been running strong for such a long time, regardless of what it was. Shortly after 3 weeks had passed since the detectives had made contact with the party, the mobile phone intercepts that occurred on Friday nights began to become more frequent and explicit. Both of the cheating spouses had come to the conclusion that everything had been resolved, and they also came to the conclusion that I had reached the conclusion that there was nothing going on during this time period. The spare bedroom was nearly totally occupied by me at that point. When I tried to kiss Laura on the cheek, I could hardly stand up. Upon my return to my house in the evening, I realized that there was no way I could ever have sexual relations with her. She made a number of hints that she was Mabel to some passionate sex throughout the conversation, but I chose to ignore her. I read every book that Alissa had in her small collection, and after I had perfected a hard-sounding dry cough, I went out and purchased additional books for us to read over together. There was no question in Laura's mind about why I was sleeping apart from her. On the other hand, Laura never once mentioned that I should avoid being around the infant when I was coughing like that. On the other hand, Carl and his team saw that the number of late-night chats that took place between the two on their cell phones had significantly increased. The meeting between Laura and Brian was scheduled to take place at their typical low-cost motel on the Wednesday of the 3D week. As a result of Carl's efforts, everyone was eagerly anticipating the opportunity to obtain information about the adulterers, and Pete, my attorney, had me prepared and ready to take action. I was able to secure the services of Mandy, a 16-year-old girl from the neighborhood, to watch Alissa. It was that evening. "It's Laura. Please do not go out tonight, I pleaded with you." When she was leaving the house, I was standing in the living room just as she was leaving. "I begged you, Laura, to not do it. I was not acting in any way. It was very important to me that she not get into contact with that son of a witch out there and beat him. It's Mark." Laura became enraged at me as she came to the realization that she could not depart with me without making an attempt to plate me. The expression on her face changed. "Look, there is absolutely nothing going on, Mark. The only thing I'm going to do is go out for a couple drinks and maybe even some dancing." That was the only thing she said, and her face was one of "butter wouldn't melt in my mouth." When she returned, she gave me a hug and looked me in the eyes with a sincere expression, all the while attempting to persuade me that I was wrong about something that I knew for a certainty she was about to do. In a moment of impulsiveness, I responded to Laura by saying, "I am aware that you are going to meet someone tonight, but you cannot possibly mean as much to him as you do to Alissa and me. I beg you, sweetie, to stay here." After taking a step back, Laura let go of me. All of a sudden, she became suspicious. She was curious about what I knew. "I need to know what the hell you are talking about. Are you?" Angry, she inquired about it. It was necessary for me to hand it on to her. She had grown into a talented actress over the years. It is merely that I insisted on it. "I am aware that you are having an affair with another person. You are not only doing this to me, but you are also doing this to Alissa. Moreover, not one of us is treated fairly by this." I voiced my opposition. She relaxed just a little bit. Clearly, her line of reasoning was that if I did not reveal a name, all I had was suspicions about the person at hand. She asserted in a forceful tone, "I am not cheating on you." I am beginning to feel a little worn out by all of these charges, and it is high time that we put an end to them. The warning came from her. "You continue to do this, damn you. Additionally, I might go hire a strange man to take care of my demands so that I can demonstrate them to you." I had to turn my gaze away. If she had seen the sudden anger that was visible in my eyes, I would have blown everything. "It's Laura. As I stated, Lee is broken. The task was not tough. Because of the rage that I was experiencing, it was difficult for me to communicate. "Not another damned word," she yelled out in a resolute whisper. "I have never done so. I am not at this moment. And I promise that I will never screw any other man than you around there. Does that fulfill your needs?" With rage. With a light jacket draped over her shoulders, she turned around and headed towards the entrance of the room. I was able to see that she was not wearing a bra, and I was also able to see that her miniskirt did not have any panty lines. "Teresa," I said it with a little more composure, "there will be no more marriage between us if you ever cheat on me. You are aware of that, right? Infidelity and the damage it does to couples were topics of discussion. When Georgia and Sam ended their relationship a year ago. Take a time to focus on this." There was no movement on the doorknob from Laura's hand. "I have informed you." Despite the fact that she claimed that her voice was controlled, I could hear a tone of condescension in it. "I solemnly vow that I have no desire for any man, but you and I will never do it." It was with a forceful tone that she remarked, "Now I'm late and I've got to go." And she did not even bother to look back at me first. She had opened the door and then departed. 20 minutes later, I joined Carl and three of his best friends in the room next to where Brian and Laura would soon be a little terrified by my protest this evening, as well as the suspicious questioning of Laura's pals and weeks past. I was there because I was concerned about whether or not they would react to my protest. It would appear that Brian and Laura were driving about aimlessly, looking for anyone who might be following them. The GPS gadgets alerted us to the fact that, in reality, neither of them had anyone following after them. Just a minute or two after the reservation was made at the motel, Carl was aware of it. This was due to the fact that the desk clerk had been compensated a couple $100 to phone when the reservation was made, owing to the fact that we were aware of their final destination. There was no justification for following them. It is possible that it may have been done, if only we had been aware of their final destination. Without the GPS instruments that were installed in both of their vehicles, Carl would have needed to use a half-dozen autos in order to keep up with Laura and her buddy while they were driving parallel roadways. Due to the fact that I had only been there for a brief period of time, none of the two would have ever seen their followers. Laura and Brian drove up to the motel in their cars practically simultaneously and parked in front of room 113. The motel had an external entry that led to all of the rooms, so all that was required of the couple of loves was to exit their automobiles and walk a few steps to reach the entrance. Both of them failed to see the dark vent that was located across the street. It was completely unknown to them that a high-end digital camera was recording their every action. In addition to deeply kissing one another and rubbing their bodies all over each other, Laura and Brian put their arms around each other and kissed each other passionately. There was a close watch on me from Carl. He was aware that the only thing I desired was to open the door and immediately begin wreaking devastation on the situation. "You, Mark?" he said in a low voice. "Before this is over, things are going to get a great deal worse. If you are able to endure this, are you sure?" After sitting back down on one of the double beds, I licked my lips, which had suddenly become dry. "Are you in possession of anything to drink?" I inquired about it. He was confused and shook his head in indifference. "No." At the same time, he offered me a small yellow tablet of Valium and stated, "I believe you should take this Valium." He said it in a soothing tone. "It will help calm your nerves." It was something that I accepted, and after that, I went and took a soft drink from the cooler that he had brought with him. Carl was successful in attempting to conceal a high-end digital camera within the room by concealing it behind the vent of the air conditioning system. It possessed a full range of motion through an arc that was 160 degrees from side to side and 85 degrees up and down. It was also in full color over its entire existence. Moreover, it featured a zoom capability of 25 times, which enabled it to single out a single hair in the nose of each of these two individuals. Not that Carl anticipated this level of specificity being required in any way. As soon as the two individuals entered the building, the action began practically instantly. In accordance with my suspicions, Laura had not worn any undergarments or a bra, and she had removed her clothes in a matter of seconds. When the two of them collapsed into the bed, Brian was not too far after. After we had shut out all of the lights in our room, two of Carl's men went out into the night. The camera and the air conditioning vent were not the only things that Carl had brought with him. He had brought several fiber-optic snake cameras. The first one was concealed beneath the door that led to Laura's room, while the second one was positioned on top of the door. A diameter of less than 4 inches and a length of only a couple of inches were the dimensions of the cameras. The transmitter and antenna were left outdoors since they were able to slide through the gaps between the door and the frame quite effortlessly, at the point where the cameras were positioned in the manner that the men desired. Under the cover of darkness, they attached the transmitters to the wall on the outside. In order to further emphasize this point, the dark-colored spy gadgets were invisible from a distance greater than a couple of feet. Before going back inside, the boys removed the screws from the one and only lamp that was located outside, which was close enough to illuminate the area. After ensuring that the receivers were properly connected to the monitors and recording equipment, we proceeded to resume our preparations for the performance. There was a belief that if one camera failed to capture something, the other two cameras would definitely catch it. In all honesty, there wasn't much of a show at all. Without a single bit of foreplay, kindness, or affection, there was absolutely none. Following the insertion of a condom with a yellowish hue, Brian proceeded to mount my 304 over my wife while she was in the missionary position and then continued to drill away. I focused my attention on her face for a little moment. As for the creases that appeared on her forehead, I was unsure if they were the result of anguish or ecstasy. After observing for a minute or two, I claimed that SBE isn't any bigger than me. Damn, I could have been wrong. To hell with it, he is not even close to being as big as I am. I voiced my opposition. Can you believe it? It was accurate. When we first got married, Laura had been in a hurry to get a measurement of me, and she had used a ruler on me on multiple occasions by that point. It was through her girlfriends that Laura was able to determine that my size was on the higher end of the average range. During the time that we were making love, she started shouting out to me and demanding that I drill her with my enormous toll. Not much of that had been done by us as of late. I suppose I was aware of the reason. But on the other hand, I didn't really do it. It was clear that Brian was on the lower end of the average, and he had to exert a lot of effort in order to provide Laura with any type of excitement. Furthermore, the creep has the technology of a hog that was roving around in a barnyard. What in the hell was Laura doing when she went to see this guy? It was possible to partially redeem my pride, sometime after that. To my great relief, I was able to catch Sherry, one of Carl's representatives, glancing at my crotch. After some time had passed, she looked up at the television displays and shook her head in dissonance. It was a smile. I was under the impression that I could see a hint of uncertainty in her eyes. We each turned our gaze away. The fact that she was employed by me meant that I was not going to mess about in my own backyard. However, she was adorable, as the saying goes. It's possible that she wouldn't always stay with me. It was going to be a bed that was going to become available, mate. A few time after that, I departed. Nothing further could be seen at that point. The fight between Brian and Laura would last for a while, take a break, and then try it again. As for Laura, what exactly did she see in this yahoo? Moreover, why did she choose to have sexual relations with him after she had been married for 6 years? There was a week that passed before the two adulterers finally met, and by that time, they were both more than a little frustrated with a world that kept them apart. It appeared that their schedules were not aligning very well for a change, and they were at a loss for what to do about the situation for the time being. At some point, Kathy approached Laura with a proposition, suggesting that she and AG take a trip to Las Vegas for the next weekend. The team that was conducting the investigation had a comprehensive file on Kathy. At this point, they had discovered a mountain of information regarding her. I am Kathy. In all appearances, she was a woman who was incredibly cruel. In a phone call, her friends understood that she was resentful and that she had become estranged from her parents and siblings as a result of her previous infidelity. The team of Carl was keeping an eye on neither of them. On the basis of her earlier suggestion, Kathy elaborated. In a Callan contest that was being broadcast on the radio, Kathy had won one too many free tickets to Vegas, and she had invited Laura to accompany her on her trip. She wanted Laura to tell me about it. After listening to the recording of the phone call, it became abundantly evident to everyone that Kathy was suggesting that Laura and she should be the sole ones to go on a trip to Sin City. Simply expressed, the objective was to engage in sexual activity as frequently as possible. She informed Laura that she had purchased 20 condoms with the intention of using each and every one of them. However, she put a wrench into Kathy's plans by immediately calling Brian and encouraging him to come along. Laura was swiftly won over, but she did this by calling Brian. After receiving the news in a later phone call, Kathy's tone conveyed that she was dissatisfied with the fact that Brian would be joining them there, but she did not raise any objections. According to what I learned, Brian was responsible for paying his own way. I couldn't help but think what a cheap man he was because of the snippy quality of his last phone call before he left. He didn't appear to appreciate that much, and I couldn't escape the thought that he was a cheap man. His idea was that Laura ought to foot the bill for his journey out there so that he could take advantage of her. What a miracle. It's Pete. My attorney informed me that he was going to add Kathy to the list of individuals whom he would serve with subpoenas. By persuading Laura to spend the weekend in Las Vegas, she was well aware of the fact that both Laura and Brian were married, and she had been aware of this for a considerable amount of time. She was playing the role of a facilitator throughout the entire baffling affair. Pete did not believe that she had any money that he could extract from her possession. Even if the litigation were to be brought before civil courts, he did not believe it would be successful. On the other hand, he was going to instill a sense of dread in her. As soon as he was finished with her, he stated that she would never, ever, ever consider assisting in the dissolution of the marriage of another couple. We talked about whether or not to put an end to this situation with simply the tape from the motel, or whether or not to wait until the prearranged trip to Vegas. The intrigue, the lying, and the dishonesty were all things that I was considering putting an end to right now, and I was also considering starting the divorce processes on Laura right away. We ought to provide them with a little bit more rope so that they may hang themselves, Pete thought. As he phrased it, the trip outside of the state, along with all of the lies and misrepresentations that would accompany it, would be the turning point in their lives. It would have a particularly significant impact if Laura shown a particularly egregious lack of regard for the promises she made during her marriage. Lawyers have a humorous way of speaking. What he actually desired was to witness her crossing the boundary, whether it was through words or actions, as they transpired. Both were obtained by him. While Kathy, Brian, and Laura were staying at the casino hotel, the detectives were also present in the same hotel. They were located in one of the two towers, while Carl and 5 of his henchmen were in a chamber in the other tower. From that room, there was a direct line of sight down into the room where the cheating trio was holding their meeting. It had cost us $500 for the room clerk to assign a room on this side of the building, and it was a room that was plainly visible from where Carl was located. It was reported by Carlos operatives that those 5 bills vanished from the counter in a manner that was faster than the human eye could track. It will take a few seconds to complete the reservation. A computer console was all that the clerk was required to perform. In all likelihood, he believed that it was the least difficult money he had ever made in his whole life, in close proximity, only a few hundred feet distant. The space occupied by Laura. There were 3 cameras that Carl had set up in order to record the activity that was taking place in the room across the road. I was informed by him that there was a likely possibility that they would have something to record. According to the studies that he had observed, individuals who were located in high-rise buildings had an innate perception that their height and perceived distance from other structures provided them with a high degree of invisibility. This perception had been confirmed in a number of the situations that he had overseen. He stated that even if they closed the shades, Carl's boys had a laser-based technology that would be able to see the Inuit vibrations of the window over there, of the sounds made by the 3 partygoers over there. He claimed this even on the condition that they closed the blinds, and only recording of their voices would be available to us. There is no video, but if there were one, it would be of a high enough quality to ensure that the speakers could be identified in court. It was something that had been perfected during the Cold War and was utilized by intelligence organizations from both the West and Russia in order to spy on one another, according to Carl of the Russian Federation. The chat that took place over the phone was also intended to be recorded. Without a doubt, I was going to give Laura a call and make one final effort on my end to convince her to stop cheating on me and come back to me. On the other hand, from the perspective of my attorney, it was nothing more than a screenplay that had been produced, but I was holding out hope that it may be successful. When I moved my body, I could feel both hot flushes and icy chills chasing each other around in a frantic manner. My mind was filled with a variety of conflicting feelings that chased around in a manner that was very similar. I had no idea what I was experiencing. All I knew was that I was in pain. Despite the fact that I hadn't consumed anything throughout the entire day, I felt ill to my stomach. I was left at home by Carl and his people, but I was able to obtain a view of the event through the cameras. They hired a private investigator to keep an eye on them, almost watched them in every way. That's it. Inside the aircraft, there is a steward who is handing them miniature bottles of blue. They had already been blown away by the wind by 3 sheets. As I spoke into the webcam on the mobile phone, I addressed Laura. As I looked over, I noticed that Laura was lying on the bed with her knees and elbows on the ground while Brian was standing behind her. In order for her to reach the phone that was sitting on the nightstand, she had to wriggle her body and extend about. Kathy, who was standing behind Brian, was taking pleasure in the angry words that she was uttering into her mobile phone. Upon hearing my voice, she separated herself from Brian and Kathy and moved away from them. "Teresa, please, honey, do not have sexual relations with me," I repeated. That is the dude. It was almost as if I had forgotten to mention the man's name. It would be necessary for me to view it. It wasn't that I was expected to know his name just yet. I was unable to let Laura know about her. Each and every action was being stealthily observed. "Come back to me, my sweetheart. We begged you, please. We are able to discover a solution." I made an effort to come across as reassuring as I possibly could. This is the term that my attorney wanted me to use in my document. This was done with the intention of demonstrating Laura's complete lack of faithfulness and apathy. "Please keep Alissa in your thoughts, Laura. Imagine what it will be like for her if we end up damaging our marriage. It is remarkable how long a man can continue to have hope, even while he is witnessing the destruction of something wonderful right in front of his eyes." I had a deep affection for Laura. I had high hopes that I would be able to witness anything that would inspire me to have hope. In spite of this, there was absolutely no hope. It's possible that I love her. I had not yet acquired the ability to refrain from doing so. However, I definitely did not like her at all. This very instant, in fact. Almost immediately, she confirmed that she did not detest it. "Stupid of you." Within the phone, Laura let out a scream. "I've expressed this to you before, you idiot. I am not having sexual relations with anyone, and I have had enough of your damn intrusions into my life." In response to the deceit, all I could do was shake my head. How could she say that? She was right there, naked, with the man she had been with and would be with again after I hung up. I couldn't believe how two-faced she was. She was silent for a bit on TV. I saw her move closer to her friends, watching them. "But I'll tell you this, dear," she finally said, sounding like she was sharing a secret. "I might just go find some guy down on the street tonight and bring him to my room. How about that, love? Would that make you happy? I'd do it just so you can be right for once. How's that sound, dear?" The nastiness in her voice shocked me. This was the same woman who, a year ago, needed to be held all night after her favorite cat died. I used to think of Laura as this warm, comforting person in my bed, someone I could go to with anything, and a loving partner when our baby was asleep. "Laura?" I said, feeling shaky. "I don't know what to say. I don't know why you want to mess up our lives this way. Think about what this will do to Alissa, for heaven's sake. Laura cut me off with a loud yell. "Go to hell and take her with you," she screamed. She was almost too mad to make sense. I only got what she was saying because I could see her mouth moving on the screen. "You jerk. We're going to sort this out when I get back, and you'd better hope I don't leave you for good. Got that? You—" She yelled some more stuff I couldn't make out, even though I could see her mouth. She hit the off button and tossed the cell phone at the bed. It missed and ended up somewhere between the bed and the wall. She stumbled over to the bed and told Brian to get ready again. On Sunday morning, Carl and his team took down all the gear, packed it up, and sent it back. Tired, they got on a plane and slept all the way home. We had so much proof, like videos, pictures, phone talks, and money records, that my lawyer was swamped. He'd set the divorce in motion by Monday noon. He then had 6 months to sift through all the evidence before the state would just nod and grant my divorce. Right off, we used a clear video of my wife with another man, yelling bad words about me and our daughter, caught through an open window. What we saw, we also recorded as proof. We added videos from our home cameras showing my wife ignoring our daughter, Alice, like the time she left and Alice ran after her, or when she snapped at Alice for no small reason, and once when she told Alice to make her own breakfast because she was too busy. All this was shown to a judge. By early Monday, the judge agreed to keep my wife away from Alice, giving me full custody for now, until a family court judge could look at everything. We also got approved to keep my wife from seeing Alice until a deeper review. We got a few more things approved with no fuss. Being rich and powerful surely helps get things done fast. I was making my lawyer even richer. Monday mornings were tough at the accounting firm. Many liked to drink a lot. Some even started on Friday night and didn't stop till Sunday evening. Most folks at work were just lazing at their desks or chatting by the coffee spot till the drinkers settled down. When the tall guy in a gray suit walked in from the hall right after lunchtime, Some women watched him go by, but he didn't seem to care. He kept looking at a photo in his hand and then at every woman's face. Soon, he spotted the one he was looking for. He stood right in front of her while she was talking quietly to a tall, sharp man in his 40s and a shorter, thin man who was sticking close to her. She was trying to keep her distance from him and looked upset. Her eyes were dark with worry. She was forcing herself to listen to what her boss was saying. "Laura Archer?" the tall man asked in a deep voice. He had sneaked up on the three. The woman turned and nodded. She was not okay today. Something was bothering her, and it was clear on her face. She watched as the man pulled out a thick envelope from his coat. "You, madam," he said loudly, making sure all eyes were on him. He put down his briefcase and pulled out legal papers that were thin like onion skin and had a thicker baby blue paper behind them. "This," he said to a shocked Laura, "is a copy of the divorce request filed this morning. Mr. Mark Archer wants to end the marriage as soon as he can." He handed her another pile of papers. "This, madam, is a court order that says you can't be within 1,000 feet of the house you and Mr. Archer lived in." He gave her another bunch of papers. "This is a court order that says you can't talk to Mr. Archer's daughter, one Alissa Rio Archer, at all. You can't call, email, write, or try to talk to Miss Archer in any way." "Got it, ma'am?" he asked. Laura just shook her head, lost for words. She was shocked, and it showed. A big crowd started to form around Mr. Archer. The large man shared news that all the credit cards shared by you two were cut off 2 hours ago. The bank accounts you both had were shut down, too. You get half of what was in those accounts. He showed her a check like it was dirty, then put it with the other papers and gave them to Laura Archer. "Mr. Archer also says he's packing all your stuff right now. It'll be put in a truck. Soon your things will be in storage. You can get them when you want. Just call Mr. Archer's lawyer using this card's number. You can't go back to the house you shared. New locks, new security code." The large man looked at Laura, who was now crying, without any kindness. He noticed someone trying to leave quietly. "Mr. SR, wait up," he called. He gave Brian Cirque another envelope, hitting his hand. "Good news," he said. "You're in the middle of Archer's divorce," and he handed Brian another stack of papers. "You're also sued by Mr. Archer as of today, and maliciously interfering in the marriage between Mark Archer and Laura Archer, and that you have been carrying on a slim, ugly, sordid little affair with the former Mrs. Archer." Brian looked like he was going to pass out and had to grab onto a desk to not fall. My lawyer didn't think that this big guy looked around, spotting Laura's boss. He walked over to hand him a legal notice. It was a claim filed that morning asking for Mark Archer to be paid back because the company didn't follow its own rules about how people should act at work for those higher up. A top boss who knew about the issues from the start got the same notice in the fancy office area, watching from afar. I felt nothing. I was ice cold. My heart turned into a land of ice. I stood quiet near the doors where the legal guy came in. I had given him extra money to hand my wife the check and some other things. It was not really his job. I saw how Laura realized she had messed up big time when she fell to the floor. I walked out through the large doors. I watched my soon-to-be ex-wife enter the fancy meeting room. I was sitting at the front of the long table near the windows. The bright sun kept my face hidden, and she had to squint to see it was me. I sat in a big boss chair trying to look chill even though I wasn't feeling it, but I hid it well. I had a lot of practice. "I wanted to see you before the lawyers did," Laura said in an unsure way. She pulled a chair close and sat down. It had been about 4 months since she lost her job and moved back with her brother. Her brown hair was almost long again. She had cut it short when she started at the finance place, thinking it looked more sharp and made her seem like a serious professional. She looked thin and moved badly. She seemed like she hadn't been eating or sleeping well. Dark circles were under her eyes. My heart felt for her, but I didn't let it show. I had my tough boss face on, the one I use for work. It was usually very strict. "And now you are here?" I asked her softly. She nodded, not looking at me. Then she had to face me. "Mark," she said in a low voice, "I want to say I am so sorry for what I did to you and our little girl." I didn't say anything. I know it's not enough, and it doesn't fix the pain I caused, but it's all I can say, she said quietly. "I'm hurting too." "Mark," she said, "I can't understand why I did what I did, and it's making me go mad." She didn't say more for a long time, so I spoke up. I'm hurting too, I said plainly. You don't know what hurt is, Laura, until you have to tell a 3-year-old that her mom might not come back. Laura started to cry softly. It's been 4 months since I told her, Laura, and she still cries at night. Only lately can I make her smile a bit. I stopped, watching Laura cry more in her seat. She yells and fights anyone trying to stop her from running to me. If I leave her for too long, I said quietly. She's scared I won't come back. Can you think how scary that is for a little girl? Laura, can you? I tried to relax in my chair while Laura cried hard. She's in a new daycare here at work. I had to make one so I'd never be too far away again. She panics when she can't find me. I watched Laura cry for a bit more, trying to sound happier than I felt. The work mums here are doing better than ever, and it's almost paid for itself. She didn't react. I waited. Why? I asked as soft as I could. Why did you do it, Laura? I loved you more than anything, and you tore my heart out. There's a big hole in me now, Laura. I can't start to fill it until I know why. She just shook her head and let tears fall. She wore no makeup. She must have known she'd cry. She looked even more beautiful now at 30 than when we got married. My heart hurt watching her cry. I felt like crying too. I lost my younger brother in a car crash as a teen. I felt worse today than back then, and I didn't know how to make things right. The pain might never go away, I thought. I don't know why, she said after a while. Maybe I'm crazy. She was silent. I can't take back what I did. Mark, she said quietly, I don't deserve you to forgive me, and I won't ask, she whispered. I hurt the only man I'll ever love so much. I have to live with that pain forever, and I don't know what to do. I wish I was gone. When I think of what I did to our little girl, when I hear myself on that night yelling at you to take her away with you. She stopped and looked up, tears still coming. When I was trying to bring up the DVD player in the corner, I almost used the remote control that was beside my hand. However, I did not consult the list of bookmarks that was on the disc. I was aware of which one was the scene in which this woman, who was naked and intoxicated, was beating her own daughter to hell. I did not do it because it appeared to be superfluous. It would appear that she already had ample knowledge about it. Following a period of time, her weeping ceased and slowed down. I was under the impression that she was probably too dehydrated to cry anymore. I placed the remote control in one of the upper drawers of the credenza that was located close. Do you think I should see a psychologist or a counselor? Sluggishly, she stated. I'm trying to figure out why I was so responsible for destroying our lives and causing so much pain to so many other people as well. Her fingers connected to each other in a manner resembling that of a multitude of serpents. My desire is to meet with Stacy Collier. She took a risk. Please accept my apologies for the harm that I have caused to her family. Regarding me, she was kind. Laura pondered the situation, but I have no idea why. Immediately in front of her, she fixed her gaze on the grain that was embedded in the hard tabletop. It is she. I was told by Stacy that Brian was able to find a woman at his place of employment on a regular basis for a period of time. She claimed that she had been accustomed to it, but that she has finally reached her breaking point. Brian is getting a divorce, and she is already moving on with her life. Having met a man who is interested in her, who loves her children, and who she considers to be the best thing that has ever happened to her, she is ecstatic. I was familiar with Stacy. See, she was going through the divorce process with her husband, and I was aware of the new men in her life. I had no idea that Laura had gone to Stacy and apologized. The fact that she had done so said that she felt regret and was willing to take responsibility for the things that she had done. From the depths of my being, something positive began to emerge, and I found myself wondering whether there was any possibility that it could survive and develop. In what way is the physician advising you? I inquired about it. As soon as Laura caught a glimpse of me, she hurriedly retreated to the surface of the table. It was acknowledged by her that we have not made any headway. If I could tell you that we had, I would do anything. However, the only thing I am aware of at this point is that something occurred when I was drinking so heavily there for a period of time. Have you been given a medicine, Laura? Suddenly I spoke out, cutting off whatever it was that she was trying to say. For the very first time, she looked up at me and stared into my eyes while holding my in hers. I was unable to decipher the tumultuous array of feelings that were chasing each other across her face. No, I am not sure. It was finally her admission. It could be the very first time that It's possible that she stopped swallowing so forcefully the very first time I actually did it, when I had my first sexual encounter with Brian. It's true. I was in a terrible state of intoxication. Once more her head sank, although there were moments when I wasn't doped up. After that, I wasn't even intoxicated any longer. According to her, she started crying once more, and she did her best to stifle them. "It would be nice if I could use that reason," she whispered. Still, I do not. In my conversation with my counselor, I am attempting to discover the true causes for this. The only time she resumed her conversation was when I adjusted my weight in the chair. She had stopped talking for a while. It is Mark. My eyebrows were elevated and my chin was lifted in a questioning manner. "Are you willing to go see her? She wants to talk to you, but first she wants to know what you think. The only thing she wants to do is ask you a few questions. She would like to inquire about some things and see if she can discover anything further, but I haven't been able to convey that to her." The words that Laura spoke were a rushing tension that slammed into each other. Before I started ranting, she was attempting to take everything in before I started. It's possible that Laura looked at me in disbelief when I said in a straightforward manner, "It's Lee." "Is it you?" she inquired with a tone that was brimming with feeling. I gave a shrug. "Your husband is still me, right?" I informed her in a solemn tone. "As long as it does not put our child in danger, I will do all in my power to assist you." I was pretty close to saying "my child," but I didn't. Her eyes suddenly shone with a startling hope that got stronger as time went on. My intention was to make her realize that there was no genuine likelihood of success, so I began to say something. However, I came to a halt. For the sake of my young daughter, I was willing to investigate virtually any possible course of action that would be beneficial to her. Without any reservations, I had deeply loved Laura. I continued to love her. Unlike a spigot, love is not something that can be turned on and off at will. On the other hand, love was unable to triumph over the senses. I experienced a profound sense of betrayal. If we were on the verge of getting a divorce, then that was the course of action that fate had in store for us. After waiting for a period of 6 months, it was finally over. When my daughter was visiting me, I did not prevent my ex-wife from coming. Both during and after the divorce, this is not the case. There were several attempts made by Laura to reconcile, but the outcome was not what I desired. I had no choice but to seek professional help since the agony was simply too much for me to bear. It was of great assistance to me. I cut back on my working hours so that I could spend more time with my daughter. In the next year, Laura moved out of town and married an accountant there. The marriage included my daughter as a participant. Even though I was invited, I chose not to participate in the event. I did not marry again and instead focused my entire life on being a mother to my daughter. Please let me know what you think about my story by leaving a comment below. Thank you for taking the time to listen to it. In addition, be sure to give the Queen Cheating Tales channel a like and subscribe to it.